I'm going to start with a legal update for you, because one of the cases that we've been discussing at length here on this program is this case involving the Venezuelan gangs and Trump's effort to deport them using the Alien Enemies Act. And we didn't get to this yesterday because we did Maha with Dr. Mark Hyman. Well worth your time if you haven't seen that episode. But I really wanted to talk about what happened at the Supreme Court. So, So Trump won. He's allowed to resume the deportations of these suspected gang members. There is a silver lining of sorts for his opponents. They will be getting more due process than they had been. But make no mistake about it, Trump won this battle, and it was for really important reasons. And while I've watched the media coverage over the past 2 days, I've seen what I think are, in some cases, dishonest declarations of victory by the left, and in other cases, just probably misinformed declarations of victory by the left. I think Trump got virtually everything he wanted. I mean, really, he got everything he wanted in this Supreme Court ruling. The one point on which the Trump administration, quote, lost or didn't get a sweeping declaration allowing them to proceed unbridled was on a point they had already conceded in their appellate briefs. And it was whether these detainees have the right to any due process at all. And the Trump administration's briefs, the DOJ in their briefs, had admitted, yes, they do get some due process, but it's about as minimal as one can demand under the law. It's not the full due process you or I would get. Let's say, God forbid, we got arrested and had to defend ourselves in criminal court. It is something much closer to what we give your average suspected illegal before we kick him out of the United States. You can file what's known as a habeas petition and go to immigration court. You don't have the right to counsel. You don't have really any of the rights that you would have, as we understand that term, due process in our criminal courts. So it is not the level of protection that the detainees, the alleged gang members, lawyers, the ACLU wanted. Nowhere near. It is the level that the Trump administration had said, at best, this is what they get. But it's also true, it is a level above what was actually afforded, we believe, to most of these immigrants in this case. I actually remain a little confused on that, to be honest with you, because we deported a bunch of people who we said are gang members. Tom Homan, even yesterday, saying, let me assure you, ICE has investigated all the people who are on these flights and is without doubt that they are Tren de Aragua gang members from Venezuela, like period. They're not waffling. They're not saying maybe. That's what he is saying. And many of the people who were removed, at least on that third flight, were not deported under the Alien Enemies Act. They were just deported because they had removal proceedings already, and they failed. They failed to contest their removal orders. You know, an immigration judge listened to them and said, "Get out. You don't have the right to be here." I don't know whether they were gang members or what was adjudicated, but the point is that immigration judges had already heard them out and said, you failed to convince me. You don't get asylum. You have no right to be here. Leave. But what's been happening under the Biden administration is that then there's no step two. So it's like, get out. Then they walk out the back of the courthouse and nobody looks for them. No one stops them. There's no bus. There's no plane. And then they continue living here. So what's happened under Trump is we're now finding all those people. Tom Homan's finding all those people who do have lawful orders of removal. And at least some of them wound up on that third plane and were shipped out to El Salvador. Bye. Who cares? Goodbye. We could have put them right back into U.S. prisons. We could have continued detaining them in U.S. prisons. We didn't. We let them go out the back door. And now we shipped them off to Venezuela. So the only ones who are controversial, I mean, everyone's controversial to the left, but between us normal people, are the ones who are said to be Venezuelan gang members, but haven't had a hearing, who Trump rounded up through Homan, et cetera, and put on planes and shipped off to El Salvador, some 2 plane loads of them. And now it's going to resume. But under the Supreme Court ruling, they're going to have to, if the immigrants demand it, provide them with notice that this is why they're being removed and the opportunity for a habeas review, which again is something that happens in an immigration court and provides a very low level of due process. Now, you would not know that if you watched or read a lot of the media coverage. On the one hand, they want to lament the evil Supreme Court that sided with Trump to allow the resumption of deportations, that pulled the case away from the very strange Judge Boasberg, who really wants you to call him President Boasberg. And that guy lost jurisdiction of this case. Ha ha. The Supreme Court was really clear on that and said, wherever this is going to get decided for these immigrants, it's not going to be in Washington, D.C. You have to decide these habeas claims in the jurisdiction in which the detainee is being held. That's Texas, you idiots. And that's what Trump had been saying all along. But the ACLU, they didn't like that. They knew exactly how things were going to go for them down in a Texas habeas court. And I think we all know. I don't dispute it. Not a lot, not the same as it's going to go in front of Judge Boasberg in a civil case, a class action, which they brought. They knew exactly how to play this, right? Get it in front of this now leftist judge. He wasn't always on the left. He was originally a Bush appointee, but got elevated to the federal bench by Obama. And they played Judge Boasberg to perfection. He did exactly what they wanted at every turn. He gave them hook, line, and sinker what they wanted and ruled against the government at every turn. And now the Supreme Court has said this was forum shopping. This does not belong in the D.C. District Court. Judge Boasberg does not have jurisdiction. Goodbye. You've lost it all, sir, including, they didn't rule this way, but it's going to be as well as his stupid contempt hearing for the government. And he's lost jurisdiction of this case. It's going down to Texas, if at all. Now, these individual plaintiffs, really, there's only 5 individual plaintiffs in this case, are going to have to refile habeas claims in Texas. And just let me tell you what they did, okay? It's so annoying as I watch everybody misrepresent the facts of this case. It drives me fucking nuts. Anyway, what happened was these 5 plaintiffs, they filed a class action purportedly representing, all immigrants who fall under the Alien Enemies Act. But the way it works is there are 5 who are named who you deal with. Those 5 have never been deported. They got pulled off of these planes pursuant to Judge Boasberg's order. Those 5 originally filed a habeas action, only they did it in D.C. And that was 100% because the plaintiffs, the ACLU and so on, they wanted to get a judge like Boasberg. They're all like Judge Boasberg at the D.C. federal court level. So they filed a habeas petition. They knew that the case was going to be limited to habeas, given the nature that these are immigrants. But they tried to swing for the fences by also making it into a class action and saying Trump has violated the Administrative Procedures Act, which is a federal act. And that would have potentially kept it in D.C. in front of this D.C. judge. Well, the D.C. judge understood, I think, that was probably a no-go zone, that the latter claim. I mean, he probably knew. But in any event, he definitely knew that if it was a habeas case, it was probably going to have to stay in Texas, be refiled in Texas. So he said to them, you sure you want to keep the habeas piece of this? You sure? Might be better for you if that weren't in here. In response to which the ACLU said, if we need to get rid of the habeas, we'll do it, Judge. We'll do it. So he was like, wink, wink, yeah, you should do it. So they dropped the habeas part of their petition and just kept it a class action based on the civil claim, which kind of removed the specter of the Texas court from luring over them as they litigated before their very favorite judge, Judge Boasberg, with the illegal immigrant activist daughter who works for these groups trying to maintain presence in the United States, even if they're gang members, illegal gang members. No conflict. Okay, so they proceed in front of Boasberg and they get everything they want. But then by the time it made it up to the appellate court level, and I haven't gone back to look at all the briefs at the district court level, but definitely by the time it made it onto appeal, the U.S. government was saying a couple of things. One, the reviewability of the Alien Enemies Act is very limited. Go look at that case from 1948. This is a 1798 statute. But go look at that 1948 case, Ludecky. In that case, the court, I've read you the excerpts many times, says it's almost not reviewable. There's a couple of small things that we could review, but they're limited. And that's because we shouldn't be deciding political questions in the judicial branch. And a question about, invasion and whether we need to ban certain groups of people from the United States, that's up to the president, not up to unelected judges. So the government maintained that. Very, very limited justiciability over this act. That was number one. And number two, they do not in any world deserve the same due process as, an American citizen would get. Okay, so that was number two. But then they made clear to the courts, but the government conceded, they can have due process in a habeas proceeding. Okay, so what did the Supreme Court decide the other day? Literally exactly what the Trump administration had been arguing. I mean, I pulled it here just for some of the quotes, okay? They say, let's see. This is from the U.S. Supreme Court's decision the other day. They say, first of all, we grant the application of the government, of the DOJ. We vacate the temporary restraining orders that Judge Boasberg entered. They say the detainees want equitable relief against this Alien Enemies Act proclamation, and they don't want to be removed under this Alien Enemies Act. They challenge the government's interpretation of the act and assert that they do not fall within the category of removable alien enemies. They say, we do not reach those arguments. Challenges to removal under the Alien Enemies Act, a statute which largely precludes judicial review, citing Ludecky, must be brought in habeas. So here's the court saying, if you have a challenge, you have to bring it in habeas, and they get to later saying that means Texas here. But they note in their own opinion that this statute, quote, largely precludes judicial review. The court didn't have to get to what pieces of it are precluded entirely because they didn't really have to go there in this piece. But here's some more of what they did say. They touched on it. They go on to say, although judicial review under the Alien Enemies Act is limited, we have held that an individual subject to detention and removal under the statute is entitled to judicial review as to questions of interpretation and constitutionality of the act. So if you want to say this whole act is unconstitutional, you can bring that. And interpretation of the act, like what does it mean? A court is allowed to speak to that. This is what it means. It means the president can invoke it when there's been an act of war, an invasion, an incursion, and there's still an open debate about whether the court can second guess a president's decision that an invasion has happened. That has not yet been decided. And, we'll see how that turns out. I've argued that they should not second guess that. How can a court decide what an invasion is more than a president? We've had smart legal scholars come on and say they disagree. So that one's still up for grabs. And then they say you can also have a court review whether an individual is in fact an alien enemy, 14 years of age or older. That was what we said. That's what the law said. But Trump's order basically just said anybody who's a Tren de Aragua member from Venezuela and over 14. He said alien enemies defined to include all Venezuelan citizens 14 years of age or older who are members of Tren de Aragua within the United States and not actually naturalized or lawful permanent residents of the United States. Okay, so basically what they're saying is detainees are entitled to notice and an opportunity to be heard, appropriate to the nature of the case, and what that means here is habeas. They say the notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. Okay, that didn't happen here. They were not given that here. So that's progress. That's some progress for the ACLU. Now they definitely have something in writing saying it has to happen beforehand, and that'll happen now. But again, the government had already conceded that point in its briefs, saying we'll do that. But let's just be clear on what's happening here. This is not in any way what the ACLU wanted. They wanted a full due process style grant that would mirror what you or I would get in a criminal court before these people got labeled Venezuelan gang members and shipped off to El Salvador. And the court has made really clear that's not going to happen. And you don't have to take my word for it. the advocate groups for the illegals themselves are making really clear that they're unhappy with this decision. So the media may want to tell you that the Trump administration got slapped for not providing more due process. That's not what happened. They said they deserve a little more due process. But here's, for example, the reaction from some of the immigrant groups who have been, the representatives who have been speaking out about this. First of all, they point out that the Supreme Court has ruled that due process in immigration cases is not the same as in criminal cases. You get notice and opportunity to be heard, and that's it. You don't get a lawyer, you don't get all this stuff guaranteed to you. But here's an organization, Vera, VERA.org, that says, okay, the Supreme Court affirmed notice and hearing are required, so good, but they limited it to these small procedural safeguards. And they said these limited procedural safeguards do little to blunt the harm to immigrant communities who will have no meaningful way to defend their rights. The Supreme Court's affirmation of due process rights in the habeas context is entirely, quote, hollow. So that's where we are. It's interesting to me because even in Sonia Sotomayor's dissent, she tries to overstate what the court has held. Like, well, look, we have to be really clear now. Everybody's getting total due process, and we can review any part of the Alien Enemies Act that we want. I mean, she totally overstates what the majority actually held in its opinion. What they actually held was there's limited review, very limited review under the Alien Enemies Act. And when it comes, it's going to have to come in the context of a habeas proceeding that must be filed in the jurisdiction in which the complaining person is being held. That's it. This is a very good ruling for Trump. Tariff wars, stubborn inflation. No wonder gold has been routinely hitting all-time highs. And volatile markets like the one we have now, don't sit on the sidelines with your head in the sand. You can take control and safeguard your savings. Aren't you thinking about that today? That's why so many Americans today are turning to Birch Gold Group. They've helped tens of thousands convert an existing IRA or 401k into one in physical gold. Is it time for you to hedge against economic instability or market instability with gold? To learn how to own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account, text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold will send you a free, no-obligation info kit. Again, just text MK to the number 989898. With an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and countless five-star reviews, Birch Gold has helped many protect their savings with gold. It took us decades to get into the tangled mess we're trying to unpack right now. How long will it take to get out of it? And at what cost? Text MK to 989898 today. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.